Hello everyone, I'm Strat Tom, and this is the Mod Spotlight, where I shine a spotlight on all my favourite mods. And today we are looking at a full conversion mod for Attilla Total War, Medieval Kingdoms 1212 AD. Medieval Kingdoms is a full conversion mod that begins in the year, believe it or not, 1212 AD. For everyone out there who loved Medieval 2 Total War and has always been wondering, where's Medieval 3? I think that Medieval Kingdoms 1212 is the closest that we're going to get to Medieval 3. There were some rumours of a Medieval 3 coming out, but then we got an announcement of a second Three Kingdoms, so who knows. Anyway, enough about potential future games, what about this mod that we have right now? As Medieval Kingdoms is based on Attilla Total War, that means it can take advantage of the amount of factions available to that game. Medieval Kingdoms 1212 AD can finally have a proper representation of all the different smaller duchies and principalities and republics that were there in the medieval era. The sheer number of factions in this game is incredible, and all of them are just so wonderfully produced, each with their own art style and aesthetic. And speaking of art style and aesthetic, you really have to take a look at some of the unit models in this game. They are utterly sublime. Medieval Kingdoms gives us a huge and eclectic range of armour styles and colours when it comes to the different types of unit models, which is based far more in historical fact than any other of the base Total War games that I've ever seen. Of course, the armies need to be differentiated from one another on the battlefield, and so they do tend to have a colour scheme for each faction, which is not historically accurate, but this is still a game and we have to have some way of knowing who's who. Regardless of which, they are absolutely fantastic. The detail in these units is absolutely incredible, and the creators of the mod they have to be applauded so much in how this game looks. It's incredibly good. In terms of the gameplay, there is not too much overhaul, and that does reflect the base game of Attilla Total War in so much that it's really difficult at times too. One thing they have included, which looks slightly inspired by Paradox titles, is the implication of different decisions. For instance, one of the factions you can play as is the Nicaean Empire. In the year 1212 AD, Constantinople was under the occupation of a group of Latin Christians that were left over after the sacking of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade. The Empire of Nicaea represents what is left of the Byzantine Empire. Historically, the Byzantine Empire would retake Constantinople and would continue on for another couple of centuries before the Ottomans eventually took them out. In Medieval Kingdoms, if you're playing as the Empire of Nicaea and you retake Constantinople, well, that means you can make the decision to reform your faction, and then you'll be back to being known as the Byzantine Empire. It's cool little things like that that allow you to reform your faction depending on how well you're doing in the game. Not only this, but you are presented with impasses at times that you have to make a decision on one way or the other. During my time playing as the Kingdom of England, the Barons' War happened. However, it didn't have to happen. In 1212 AD, we are during the reign of King John. As King John, I could choose early on to declare war on France and try and retake some of the lost land, like in Normandy, that John lost earlier in his reign. To do that would inspire certain confidences in your barons and therefore avoid the war. However, you're really not in a position to start fighting France at the start. If you then decide not to attack France, you are presented with the decision to sign the Magna Carta or not. If you do sign it, then the civil war can be avoided, but you are stuck with certain penalties. If you refuse to sign it, then the civil war happens. In my playthrough, the civil war happened and I ended up knocking down the barons. My King John was far more successful than the real life King John. However, this is one aspect that Medieval Kingdoms 1212 AD has taken the Total War formula and has improved it vastly. These sorts of story-like decisions are just kind of missing from most of the Total War games, and it really adds a layer of depth to this game, and it's really very impressive. I also had a game when I played as the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and it was a really difficult beginning to start with. You have so little land at the start, which does not include Jerusalem, by the way. That has been retaken from you, and it is your job as the Kingdom of Jerusalem to retake Jerusalem, which in real life they never did. Basically, Medieval Kingdoms 1212 AD is a wonderfully made, incredibly detailed, but also really challenging game. In terms of a recommendation for this mod, is it worth getting? I would go as far to say that if you don't already own Attila Total War, this mod is worth buying that game for. It's that good. It is an utterly inspired mod. It is a labour of love from the people who have made it, and it just blows my mind the level of detail that some of these modders can achieve. I have nothing but love and admiration for these people. I would at this point usually try and point out and say, well, they could do this to improve it, or they could do that to improve it, but I honestly can't think of anything. There's no detail they've missed. There's nothing. If there's any flaws with it, it's a flaw with the base game, not the mod itself. So my hat's off to the entire Medieval Kingdoms 1212 AD team. Anyway, I want to thank you for watching. Remember to like, share and subscribe. I've been Strat Tom, and I'll see you next time.